Hello my friends, welcome back to part 3. It's looking well so far, isn't it? I'm quite happy with this. And an interesting comment actually on this, someone was saying the foliage pushes the waterfall back, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. That's why I used the palette knife for the foliage, just to create a nice rich strong foliage, because I want to push the waterfall right back into the distance. But so it worked. So thank you for that comment. So look, it's coming on quite nice. We have a lot to get through in the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. Lots of rocks, a bit of water coming down between them, a little bit more foliage and bushes. A lot to get through. So I'll start with some of the rocks. I think I might just start blocking all of this in with one colour, and then just start picking out the rocks with the brush. So it'll be quite time consuming. I might just start by painting 2 or 3 rocks or 4 rocks, and then maybe skip ahead a little bit for you, because it's basically, when you paint one, they're all the same. It's the same technique for them all. So I just don't want you getting bored and switching off and going to something else. It's just going to be the same process for each rock. So I'll paint a few rocks for you, and I'll see when I'm editing, because it depends on how long it takes, you know what I mean? I could be an hour just painting a few rocks for you. So I might just paint a few and maybe skip ahead 4 or 5 rocks towards the end of the rocks, if you understand what I mean. Because once you see me painting a few, it's the same process really for each and every rock after that. It's the very same process. So I'll do a couple and maybe skip ahead 5 or 10 minutes or so, something like that. Look, we'll see as we paint. It's very spontaneous here on easy oil painting. Anything can happen, and as I'm painting, things can happen, things change. It's not scripted as such. None of these tutorials are scripted. So if something happens along the way, it happens, and it's all on camera. If I have an accident or make a big mistake, it's all there on camera. I try not to edit mistakes out. I like to keep it real, because that's the way it is in real life. People paint and they make mistakes. That's just what happens. So look, we'll see how we go. Let's just go and have a bit of fun with this. If you want to learn about painting rocks and creating texture on rocks, about, you know, with water and that kind of thing, maybe you're painting a river or something like that, this is going to be an interesting tutorial. So I'll try my best to explain it as I'm going along, and I'll take my time for the first couple. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining me, and I might get this finished in one part. Then again, I might stop after 30 or 40 minutes and move on to part 4 for finishing touches, perhaps. But we'll see as we go. All right? Happy painting. I'll be right back. Okay, this is it. I did do a very quick sketch, just a rough couple of outlines of some of the primary rocks and boulders, just to give me some reference. The big ones, you know, just a very, very light reference, that's all. Let me roll up my sleeves and let's go. Let's have some fun with this. So I'm thinking the best way to approach this is by starting to just block in some of the middle shades. So normally I would go with a lot of dark splotches of colour and then put in lights. I think I'll mix a medium shade for this, just to fill in a lot of the medium colour. I'm going to go for, now there's a lot of greeny hue in the rocks, yellowy green sort of a hue, and then it goes to kind of a dark colour. But I want to try and warm it slightly. I don't want to go too kind of dull with these. I want to make them slightly warm. I've dampened my brush slightly. Take some black, and I might go for some burnt sienna. That gives me a kind of a muddy kind of a brown shade. Then I'll take a little Naples yellow. I'm just messing around with colours here now, just to try and find a nice little shade, a nice medium shade. I might take a touch of phthalo blue into this. That will just kind of green it slightly, make it slightly sort of mucky. Let me just check this now. Okay, I think I'll go with that. That's not bad. I'm going to thin that slightly now, just a little thinners in there, just to help block in some of this. So I'm basically just going to go along and fill in a lot of this area. I am going to try and leave some of the bigger rocks so I can concentrate on those separately. You understand what I mean? So for example, this big one, I think I leave that. I'll just go around that one, leave some of those. This area is all kind of in darkness up here, isn't it? I'm going to take another bit of black and a little bit of the blue. The reason I'm taking a little touch of phthalo blue is because that just sort of puts a greeny hue in the colour. So kind of, you see that kind of a greeny grey hue in the colour, and I think that's a nice colour for the shade. I'm really just concentrating on filling in all the dark areas with this. Come over here, let's just put a bit of dark up there. You know what, I'll just go over. Let's just go over it all. We can pick out our darks then in a moment. Dark area over here with some green and all that kind of stuff. You could, if you wanted to, just tint all of this with a dark brown or something like that. If you wanted to, you could do that as well. Absolutely. Now I'll take some black, a little bit of blue, and some white. That gives me a nice grey. I'm going to pop some grey into some of these. Take a touch of burnt sienna as well. That will just warm the grey slightly. Pop little bits of grey in here and there. Now, it'll make sense in a moment. I know it probably all looks like just a big mess at the moment, but I just want to kind of start building some layers. And this is what I always do when I'm painting. I start with thin layers and build it all up. Let's put a bit there. I build up the layers, starting with a very thin layer like this, and then just build them up slowly. And this is all water coming down here, so I can leave that. And there's a couple of rocks just over here. And you're probably thinking this is just a big mess at the moment, but it will make sense. Now I'm going to start putting in, and I'm going to start refining the shapes of the rocks. So I have, a lot of the dark in. That's what I just want to do. Basically, I want to cover some of the white of the canvas. Now I'm going to go with a smaller brush, small flat brush, and I'm going to start putting in some of the darker shades, all right? Any kind of a medium flat brush will do fine for this. I'm going to take some black, and I'm going to mix up a nice bit of this now, a good bit of this. And I'm going to take some burnt umber, and possibly a touch of blue. Now you could even go with a purple for this. Let's take some phthalo blue, and let's take some magenta. We already have a hint of black in there as well. So with this dark, it's like a very dark bluey kind of a purple color. That's what I have basically. And I'm simply going to start, I'm going to looking at my reference photograph now, but not too much. The primary is this area where the water comes down. That's kind of the primary focus that I want to concentrate on. Everything up here really is just lots of rocks. So you can make this your own, basically. You don't have to copy everything exactly. So look, I'm going to start putting in some impressions of darks on some of the rocks. I'm not even looking at the reference photograph now. I'm just making it my own. I'm just going to imagine lots of rocks and boulders and stuff coming down into the painting. already is starting to take a little bit of shape, a little bit more magenta. I'm going to go with a more of a pinky colour. Some of the primary kind of rocks, we'll say. So I can see a kind of a big one there coming down like that. In between all of this is just going to be lots of lights and darks, basically, coming into the painting. I'm not going to try and copy this exactly because that would take me hours and hours and hours. If I was to sit here trying to paint every single individual rock exactly the same, I would be here till God knows what time. I would be here till tonight painting away. But that's not what I'm about. I don't like, and you know me long enough by now, I don't like copying something exactly. I need to make it my own. That's the whole point, isn't it? Okay, this big one down here, there's a lot of darkness in this, isn't there? Let's mix up plenty of that. Plenty of phthalo blue, plenty of magenta. We can pick up some cadmium red as well. Look, why not? Let's go with some cadmium red. That'll help with the colour. A nice dark, rich purple shade. And it's very dark down here. Look at that. There we go. Now it's still a bit on the blue side. I'll take a bit more cadmium red. That will help warm it slightly. And this is the process I use. I just kind of go along like this and add colours around, just picking out some of the rocks, the main rocks, the ones you really like. Pick out the main ones. So I've taken some black and burnt umber there, and I'm going to pop some black and burnt umber into some of these, just to get in. You see any really black sections, black parts of the stones and the rocks, I'm just going to put those in with this blacky colour. Paint them in like that. And it's always a very good idea to follow the direction of the fall of the rocks. So let me show you what I mean. Take some black, some magenta, and a touch of blue. So I've tried to follow the direction of the rock. So for instance, the rock coming down like that, I'm going to paint it in that shape. And I'm going to bring my brush strokes down in that direction. You understand what I mean? And another one coming out like that. And don't be afraid to give them a little bit of a wiggle here and there. Just put an impression of some coming down at that side there. You see, there's a lot going on, isn't there? It's basically a lot of area to fill with small rocks. So that's why it's going to take so much time. That's what it is in essence. It's just a big space with lots of small rocks. So I'm just going to go along and just do my own thing. Just put in an impression of lots of small little rocks here and there. I could even put extra water flowing around inside there if I like. So this is water here. I'm going to make this water. All of this will be water over here as well. Another rock here. And it's just about building up the shapes. So building them up bit by bit by bit. You know, you're not going to get these absolutely perfect first time. I don't try to paint rocks completely the first time. I build up the layers slowly. That's what I like to do. Nice little one here with a bit of shadow coming down the back of it. Look, that's quite nice. Nice little one there. I need to make this one bigger. I think the one in the middle has a very big impact in the painting. So I'm going to make that much, much bigger. I'm going to come up nice and high with that one, look. because that seems to kind of have the biggest impact I find in the painting. So look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go along. I'm going to paint a couple of highlights in some of the rocks up here, and then I may just skip ahead 5 or 10 minutes. I'll do a few extra, but I'd skip ahead just because it's going to take so long, really, to paint all of these. So I'll do a couple for you just to show you how I paint one of them, and then they're all basically the same from here on. So I might zoom in slightly. I hope you don't mind. Oh, I can't zoom in. So we'll muddle on. Come on. Let's take the same brush. I think I'll stick with this brush. I'm going to start mixing a lighter colour. I'm going to take some cadmium yellow, some Naples yellow, and maybe a little cadmium red. Tiny touch of cadmium red. So you kind of end up with this sort of a sandy colour. My brush is not perfectly clean either, by the way. Take a bit of white, another touch of yellow. Because I notice there's a lot of yellow in those highlights. There's an awful lot. Maybe a touch of burnt sienna. I just basically go along. I'm not looking at the reference photograph now, only for the main rocks. So the main ones being this one here, like this. And clean the brush. And basically, go along and add little highlights to the rocks. Keeping in mind, the light is maybe coming from slightly on, maybe overhead. I suppose the light is coming from overhead, isn't it? It's flying through those trees from overhead, and it's creating nice bright lights on the rocks. So let's go here, for example. Bring one down like that, and don't be afraid to give them a little bit of a wiggle every now and then. So it's just basically this process all the way down, just picking out highlights, and you'll notice the colour is softening into some of the rocks. And that's fine. Don't worry about that too much. Just keep your brush nice and clean. Let's go back into some cadmium yellow, some sienna, and a little white. I like that colour. That's a nice highlight colour now, isn't it? Kind of a sunlit on a rock colour. And I'm softening that colour down into the darker shade. That's why I like working wet on wet, especially with oils, because you can soften colours in and create some beautiful effects. Now I'm just mixing a little bit of that colour up. And I will also use the palette knife as well in a moment to create much stronger highlights. I'll put one or two in here. So I'm just basically going along like this, putting in bright highlights. Some of the rocks have a lot of highlights, other rocks have only a few. So that's just where you need to be a little careful. You can very quickly overdo highlights on rocks if you're not careful. Take a bit of white and pop a little bit of white. We can add our own ones as well. Look, I'm going to add a few myself, not necessarily looking at the reference photograph. So I'll just sit back very quickly. Let's take a quick look. It's slowly coming together, isn't it? Very slowly. Right, so we have some of the highlights. Now what I'm going to do is maybe put in some very bright highlights on some of them. Cadmium yellow, burnt sienna and white. So I'm now going to start putting in some real bright highlights like that, you see, just using the corner of my brush. And it's these very bright highlights that sort of bring everything to life, I find. Doesn't it? It just brings the entire rock to life because we need to show the sun is really catching some of these. Put one or two big ones across here, look. And then I'm going to soften some of them into the darker side of the rock. Just going to scrape some of them in. Now that's kind of a basic rock, I suppose, painted. The next step then would be to go in with some real dark colours. So I'm going to switch brushes. I go to a smaller flat brush, all right? I'm going to take some black and some cadmium red. So then I go into some really dark shades and I put some really nice strong darks down in and around some of those rocks. And just gently softening that dark colour along, sort of just dabbing your brush. And you see, just giving a little scrape, softening that darker colour in to those rocks. And again, this now is really just the beginning of forming all these rocks. It's the very, very early stages. So I'll do this one here, for example. Put a lot of black in here and then just soften it up, dragging that lighter colour down into the rock here and there as well. Okay, that kind of effect. So what I think I will do is I will paint away and I will just maybe skip ahead a little bit on editing. And it will just give you a much clearer picture, I think. I think you might enjoy it a little more if I just maybe skipped ahead a tiny, tiny little bit until I have a lot of these finished in this manner. It's just the very same thing for each rock, putting darks and lights on each rock. That's basically all it is. So I'm just going to work away and I'll be right back. So I've continued on here with some of these rocks, just putting extra darks in, extra lights in. The next stage I want to do is grab a palette knife. Now I only just skipped a few minutes ahead. I've only just blocked in some of the darks with a bit of black and some of the lights as well. But next, palette knife time. This is where it gets interesting, my friends. I'm going to take some cadmium yellow paint, lots of white, and let me see, I think a touch of black as well. I want this to be a very bright highlight, but not a very, very yellowy highlight. There's a hint of a kind of a greenish, grey sort of a hue on these. We take a bit of sienna as well. You can just put in a bright colour. Any colour you like, a light brown or a light grey, whatever you prefer to do yourself. Okay, this is just maybe the start of the really bright highlights. I'm just going to use my palette knife. I'm just going to start dragging down some highlights like that. And you see the way I'm just softening them into the rocks. into that dark, kind of just scraping my knife here and there, softening them in. That's really all I'm doing. And all I want to do really is just create lots and lots of texture. Texture, texture, texture. That's what you need to think about. Nice big one here, look, like that. And then scrape it and soften it in. You're just creating little crevices and all that kind of thing, and a very rough stone effect. Isn't that a nice one there now? You see that? Isn't that a nice little rock? I'm just going to stand back for a moment to take a look. Getting some nice bright texture. So I can see there's lots of them, isn't there? It's pretty much a big blob of lights and darks going across the painting, isn't it? Couple there, look, nice little one there. Now a lot of these I've decided to just kind of make my own as well. You know, I'm not particularly looking at the reference photograph. I just want to make them my own and do a few of my own rocks. Okay, put one or two here. I'm going to go with some nice really bright ones as well, just around the middle. So for example, we have a lovely bright one sort of cutting across in there, like that. And I'm going to put a nice rich bright one here as well. So just cadmium yellow, Naples yellow, cadmium yellow. It's a bit of a mucky kind of colour I have. I'm going to put this nice bright one just here. The palette knife really is fantastic for this. It really is. It's so versatile. You can do so much with it. There's so much you can do. And you see, what I then do is with these, I just take my fan brush and I just kind of soften it in. I dab across on top of the highlight, and that just, it sort of takes the harshness away from the knife, and it creates just a nice little texture on the rocks. You see? And it just kind of helps soften the lights into the darks as well. So you get that sort of nice textured feeling on the rocks. I'll bring this one down at a slight angle, so you can see it's just falling down into the dark. And you can also scrape with your brush rather than dab and soften them together. So you can kind of get the picture, you can get the idea behind all of this. It's just filling in little areas. Now I will have my final kind of very bright highlights later. They will come, and we have little bits of green and all that kind of stuff on these as well. So don't worry, we still have a long way to go. A long way to go. I'm going to take some blue and some yellow with my palette knife. I'm going to mix that up. And I'm going to scrape some of that here and there onto some of these rocks. Then I'm going to get some burnt sienna. And I'm going to just scrape some of that in. You don't have to do rocks with palette knives, by the way. I just find it's a nice way of creating a good impact for a rock and a boulder. It's a good way of creating that strong impression. You take some blue, bit of brown. That'll give us a nice dark colour as well. Pop a little bit of that. And notice I'm always kind of dragging the knife in the shape and the direction of the rock, which way the rock is falling. That's very important. Now, for some of these final highlights, I suppose a pointy brush is best. I want to just create a little bit of definition on some of the lights up there. So my little rigger brush, plenty of turpentine in there, cadmium yellow and some white. And I'll take a hint of sienna. I don't want it to be very yellow. Maybe a touch of magenta as well. So I just want to create some very bright highlights on some of these. Look, you could probably even just use white on its own. With this little touch of white with some cadmium yellow. Make it very whitey. Come on, let's just have a bit of fun. For instance, just along here, look. Good. Give that some bright touches. Now you can leave this dry if you like. It might be much easier for you if you let this dry, but I quite like the wet and wet, being able to soften colours together. You see, it's nice. There we go. So you can see just some of those very bright highlights up there. They really stand out. A bit of white even. Go around the top edges with a little white just to show or indicate the sun kind of just going around the tops of some of them and really catching some of those rocks. Now already that's making a bit of a difference, isn't it? And you may find this all very complicated because I'm doing so much. But what I always say is it's just kind of, it's little steps. So focus on one step at a time. Try not to get your rocks finished all at once. Just remember, you can keep putting paint on if you're not happy. So you see, just little dabs of colour, softening them down. So you can see these bright highlights are really helping, aren't they? They really catch the eye. And I'm going to put a nice bright one on here. And just sort of allow that to come down into the dark, disappear. So it's just a case of going like this. Just keep going. I'm going to really brighten this one here. Very, very bright. I must get some paint. I'm thinking this may have to go into a part 4 for the final touches down here for the water and all of that. I'm thinking it might, because at this rate, I think it could take at least another hour and a half to finish this painting completely. So I'm just going to show you one or two more little bits and pieces here before I call this part 3 finished. I'm going to take some of that nice bright colour. And I know the colours aren't the same as what's on the photograph, but that doesn't matter. They don't have to be. I'm going to go across here. Let me just see now. I don't want to be changing the colour too much. I want to keep it similar as much as I can. I'm just going to really brighten this rock here. I'll do the same with some of these. I'm basically just using lots and lots of thick paint on my knife. And I think my final will be maybe a little yellow and white, just to really capture the sunlight hitting these rocks. So let's grab some cadmium yellow. So if you want to get some light on your rocks, okay, this is a great way of doing it. Cadmium yellow, some white and a little sienna. That colour really jumps out and it really gives you the impression of the sun hitting your rocks. So let's try it. Little there, little up there. And I won't overdo this. I don't think I need to go any further with this. Again, I'll add more as I'm going. But I think you get the idea. And you see what you can do then, you know, when you've all this finished, what you can do then is pop a little water in between. I'll use this little flat brush here, okay? I'm going to make little water. I want to pop a little water in here and there. So I'll take some phthalo blue with a touch of magenta. And let's pop a little water in between some of these. Now on the photograph it just looks like a white, doesn't it? But I'm going to start off with this bluey shade, just so you can see it a little better, all right? So for instance, I have a lot of water coming down in here. And that can disappear. That. And we can put a little, let's put a little in here, look. A bit of water coming down like that. These are all small little things, but they will make a difference. Small little steps. Just remember, small steps. Don't try and do this all perfect at once. A little bit of water coming down. between the rocks. Then I'm going to take a small brush, do the very same with your small brush. Just get a little phthalo blue, some white, and let's just put little bits of water coming down. Between all the rocks. In and around all those rocks. And this is just kind of a quick, I'm just giving you a quick impression, but it's the same, really, same for each one. Just, you see that? Just showing a little water popping down in between some of those. It's simply just giving it a little bit of a wiggle here and there. That's all it is. And then grab some white and just put a couple of flicks down like that. Gives you the impression of the water just falling over. A fan brush would actually be very good for this as well. If you want to use a fan brush, you can. Just to scrape it over. This is only just a quick reference now. I will be doing a lot more work on this later on. A lot more. But this is just to give you an idea of, just creating little bits of water coming down here and there. It can be rushing fast, it can be rushing slow. So you're starting to kind of get the idea. Do try and be nice and kind of loose with all of this. I don't pay too much attention to it, if I'm being honest. I just allow my brush to go around and make some marks. That's really all I do. Allow the brush to just float around. Let the brush do the work. I'll call this part 3 finished, my friends. Part 4, all the bottom here, finishing that, doing more on the rocks, bringing the foliage down on the sides, lots of stuff. Okay, we have a lot to do, So don't try and finish it too quickly. Put a little more highlight on top of this one here. Grab some white. And cutting into that water, you see that? So, thank you so much, my friends. I'll turn the camera. Let me turn the camera. There, part 3 is finished. I will clean my palette and crack on to part 4 in a very short while. Alright, I hope you're enjoying this. I hope I didn't make it too complicated for you. Just try and focus on a little section at a time. Try not to go around painting all the rocks and finishing them all perfectly each time. Just have a bit of fun with your palette knife. Just go around and add little splashes of colour, lights and darks here and there on some of the rocks. Eventually it will come together. I know at the beginning you may think it just looks like a mess, but keep going, it will come together eventually. I still have a lot of rocks to do. I'll maybe just tip away with some of those, and we will finish up in the next tutorial. So thank you so much, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll see you very soon. I'll be back very, very shortly with the last part. Okay? Happy painting and God bless.